few people show up, and certainly we want this to be a discussion as to where things will go in the future and how things are working well. Anything else you want to say before we?
Well, I want to say that there's no us and them. There's a few people up here represent people that are in the solar industry in various ways. There are others in the audience, and we're all together, interested in promoting solar energy. So you can ask questions both ways, and people in the audience who have experience can speak up. It's not us and them. We're just sort of facing this way to try and make it a little more intimate. And I think maybe we should start by going across the group here. Introduce yourself, what your business is, how you're, what you do in the solar field, and then maybe we can kick off questions and comments. Kim, you want to start?
Yeah, Kim Praise Electric, electrical contractor. I've been doing solar for about 3.5 years. Small opportunity, so some of the players up here. But I've done about, I've been in a shop, about 100 jobs that I've done in the last 3.5 years for solar PV. I strictly do PV, not solar water.
We can hardly hear you back here.
Sorry. I strictly do PV, not solar water. I've done about 100 jobs in the last 3.5 years since I've gotten into it.
What's PV?
Photovoltaic. Solar electricity.
I'm Jack Winger from Seacoast Energy in Barrington, New Hampshire. I do solar electric and solar hot water installs. I've been doing this for about 5 years now. Mark Weisbach, KW Management, Nashville, New Hampshire. Electrical contractor also. 95% of our business is solar electric right now. Been in business since 1990. We've got probably a couple thousand kW installed now. Actually, 10,000 kW. We do a lot of large megawatt projects in Massachusetts. Our install rate in Mass right now is about 100 kW a day. In New Hampshire, it's 1 or 2 kW a day. But comparably speaking, I think New Hampshire's come a long way in both the net metering laws and the RPS laws. So we're definitely moving forward in the state, and I think we've got a long way to go.
My name is Dan Clapp with Revision Energy. We are solar thermal and PV installer in Maine, New Hampshire. We also do some work in Mass. We're an outfit of about 50 people, plumbers, electricians on staff, and we've done close to 3,000 installations since 2003.
My name is Clay Mitchell. I'm from Revolution Energy, and we are developers of projects, and we own them. So we are not really the installers. We are the ones who finance and own the systems and deliver solar energy systems under power purchase agreements, where we own the system, deliver the power to a host. The host pays nothing up front, and if we can set the utility rate correctly to the host, we kind of eliminate a lot of these discussions about return on investment by delivering the power at a lower rate than they're currently buying. And this is what's fueling the Massachusetts market, make no mistake of it. Very few people who have solar arrays in Massachusetts own them. And we're talking hundreds of megawatts.
That could be a discussion for hours. Hi, I'm Pablo Fleischman. I'm on the New Hampshire Sustainable Energy Association board. I want to acknowledge that both Clay and Mark are former board members, and thank you very much for that and for being here. I own a business in Keene. I live in an off-grid house for the last couple decades, and I own a business where we sell and install solar, electric, hot water, do a lot of wood stoves, and I'm the local energy therapist.
I already introduced myself, Ted Van Sant, and I live in Holderness, New Hampshire. I have a solar hot water system and a solar PV system at my house, and I've been in the industry for about 12 years. And I'm thrilled that we're having this group discussion. Does anybody have a burning question, comment?
Sure. I'm listening so far. Somebody talked about the cost of installing these systems for residents. We realize the federal tax credits. We're talking, I understand solar power prices come way down because China's control the market. Might be helpful with a sense of what it would cost. Cost benefit of the various systems. But would
you're asking 4 questions, and I'll try to address one, and, I don't have all the answers, but I opened my shop in 2007, and at the time, the national average for its cost, the average cost nationally for solar electric systems was about $10 per watt, and the cost now is, in New Hampshire, in my area, is below $4 a watt.
Well, the gentleman next to you put in a solar system, a hot water. If he would tell us what it costs to do it,
I think I'd rather let Dan cover that, because Dan's installing them now, that's more appropriate, what the current market is.
And just to add to the mix, I want to say that for solar electric, the payback in New Hampshire is takes twice as long as the payback in Massachusetts. So we could talk about why that might be as well. But we'll answer your question.
Yeah, talk specifically solar thermal, solar hot water. The range could be $8,000 installed to $12,000. And it really just depends on the design of the system, the demand of the occupants of the home. But you have a bunch of different variables in there. Demand and there's a federal tax credit, and also the New Hampshire PUC offers $1,500 to a $1,900 rebate, depending on the amount of collectors you install. So you have to look at it, what type of fuel source you're using, how you're currently heating. Domestic hot water, you can isolate that energy demand, plus you also have, could also tie it into space heating. So there's a wide range, and what we tend to see, again, is between $8,000 and $12,000 gross cost, $5,000 to $7,000 net after incentives, and we tend to see, depending on your fuel source and how you currently heat, 4 to 8 year paybacks.
The federal tax credit is still 30%, and that's due to expire at the end of 2015. So you still have some time. But one of the things that Dan, I think, briefly mentioned was that is demand. What we find is a lot of people are interested in solar electric or solar hot water, solar thermal systems. And the difference is primarily that solar thermal can't be net heated. So if you don't use a lot of hot water, you can't save a lot of money. So if your energy bill is $1,000 and you can save 60, 70% of that, that's $700 a year in savings. So that's a vehicle to fund your savings and your payback. Now, if you're only using $300 a year, that one collector system just isn't going to have the same net payback. And then a solar electric system may make more sense, where you're then allowing yourself to bank those hours forward while you're not using it.
And that's called net metering.
I think the other thing that's important to consider every time we start talking about this issue of payback, again, everybody's heard this a million times, but solar is different than most things on the planet. If we buy a car, after 5 years it's dead and it's not working. If we buy a solar system, it has a chance of running for 15 or 20 years, and then after the payback is over, we're done feeding money into the coin machine. It now starts feeding money back. So, in some ways, I have some German friends that I work with, and their contention is that we're looking at this completely the wrong way. Their contention is you're going to buy the energy one way or the other, so why not buy it the smart way? So what if it costs the same? What's the difference? Why should we tie ourselves to oil when we can actually control a portion of the energy?
One thing to note is when you're looking at buying a solar electric, solar hot water, or any type of renewable system, you're not saving any energy. It's an alternative way to buy energy. When somebody says, what's the payback? You're taking something that is a monthly recurring expense item, bringing it to zero, and now wanting it a payback. So you're turning it into an investment in one step, which is pretty difficult with any investment. So again, it's like buying a tank of oil or buying an oil contract for the winter. You spend $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, pre-purchase your oil. You're not investing in oil companies there. Here you're investing in your future energy costs.
No one asks, what's the payback on that furnace? Or what's the payback on that shiny new car? Those questions never get asked, but to your point exactly, I mean, it's just, it's another purchase you make, and it does determine there is a return on investment. I wanted to touch on Pavel's earlier comments about legislation and who's at the state house. And he mentioned that geothermal well represented, and there are other factions that are represented. And I'm wondering, where does the money come to get these guys to Congress? Or is that the case? Are there paid lobbyists for these industries at the State House and not the solar group? Is that what we're seeing?
The short answer is yes. The other entities have industry associations that are, how do you say it? You pay to be a member, and those dues go to primarily lobbying, and that's NHSEA is a member organization, but it's not an industry association.
Can I add to that?
Yes, please.
I'm a man in suits. My name is Rachel Goldwasser. I'm an attorney at Oren Reno in Concord. I have actually represented the Sustainable Energy Association in the legislature very briefly, in a limited way. And I'll say, because I represent lots of energy interests in the legislature, that these guys are incredibly effective at making sure that our folks in our state house hear about what our small businesses in New Hampshire are doing with renewable energy, the stuff that impacts people like you and me rather than the big companies. They're really good at it because here's what they do. You can see Pablo and Ted come into the state house and talk about their work rather than having somebody like me come in and say, well, here's what they do, and it's so great for the state. I mean, who cares? So supporting NHSEA allows these guys, and this is just my plug, and I don't represent them. I haven't represented them for years. It allows them to go in and spend that time to make sure that the legislature here did in this last year, whoever said it was right. I think we wouldn't have seen RPS come out the way it did in the last session if it hadn't been for a few people here showing up and making sure that the legislators knew what a small business in New Hampshire looks like. And it looks like the people who are sitting in front of you. So I couldn't take a moment, let that moment fly. That said, I have a question. I don't know if any of you can answer this, but how much solar PV is there in the state right now that isn't counting towards RECs? It isn't counting towards our RPS goal? That is my big pet peeve with our
How long do we have?
because we have, we spent millions, our state has spent millions of dollars supporting this industry, and we can't account for it. And I think it makes it much more difficult to make the argument in the state.
Well, to start with, I'm going to say I'd estimate somewhere around 3 to 3.5 megawatts are installed now. Most all of which, we probably had 500 kW from 1990 up till 97 or so. And since 97, we've had a big surge, and 99.9% of it's because of incentives. Somewhere between 80 and 90% of the Class 2 solar RECs, which are the RECs required to meet the RPS standard, are purchased out of state. And they're purchased at a depressed rate even more now because we have the ACP, the alternative compliance payment, went from about $170 cost inflated to $55. The RECs didn't collapse at that point. They haven't yet. So they're making about $40 per megawatt hour. Most of the systems, again, are Massachusetts-based systems that don't qualify for the new REC program. They're the old incentive program back prior to their RPS law passing and coming into effect. So we have a vast majority, all the residential systems except in the co-op district, and I'd say any commercial system less than 15 to 20 kW, it costs more to sell your RECs than you can make. So if you have in the state of New Hampshire, the average system for years running was 2 to 4 kW, with 4.99 kW being the cap. After that, you would not receive an incentive from through the Public Utilities Commission. And that was legislatively enacted, so the PUC can't change that unless the legislature changes it. What we're seeing now, though, is those systems driving up to over 5 kW, but in 2 phases. Phase 1 is to qualify for the incentive. They take their pictures if they choose to at the PUC, and then you go back and install a 2 or 3 more kW after the fact. And that allows them to leverage some of the state monies. We're still seeing those incentives in at around 45% of the total cost of the system. But again, getting back to the solar RECs, there are some onerous requirements in the state, which include third-party verifications. There are, to my knowledge, there's only one person that's third-party qualified, because you can't become third-party qualified unless you're a disinterested party. So I can't, unless I'm verifying his recs and he's verifying mine, and it's not worth it, because it still doesn't make any money. So we have that requirement, a third-party verification, which Massachusetts does not have. Any other than systems over 10 kW have to be electronically verified. So our state, and then secondly, which we have somebody in the audience here that keeps quoting the interstate commerce law, we won't say who that is, he's sleeping now. The state of Massachusetts doesn't care about the interstate commerce law, New Jersey doesn't care about it, states out west don't care about it. So they get to sell their new $240 to $500 per megawatt hour RECs only to themselves. They don't allow other states to participate. Whereas New Hampshire, as soon as it gets in front of the ST&E board, they say interstate commerce and everybody runs away. So I don't know what about New Hampshire makes us prohibitive of having laws that say some, most, or all of our RECs have to be purchased or primarily purchased in state. And again, Massachusetts does it, so I don't know, they have better lawyers or something.
So Mark, I'm going to ask you a question. Do you see it as being plausible in the next couple of years of taking that on as an issue and making some changes?
Well, that and GroupNet metering, that's the second thing that Massachusetts has that was in front of the legislature this year. One of the things, and again, I think it's going to be difficult because the utility companies do lobby very effectively. And the utility companies are going to cite the fact that it might drive up costs. Well, we're already almost at the ACP, so it can't possibly drive up the cost for Class 2 regs. But that money then stays in New Hampshire, and the monies that are being spent on those incentives are now leveraging to retire some of that requirement, and it's in-state. So residents that are paying their electric utility bills are paying into the program, and that program then pays out-of-staters to fulfill the requirements. And then second's the GroupNet metering issue.
Mark, can I just make sure, I just want to make sure I get the number right. So if I were to say we've got about 3 megawatts of solar PV in New Hampshire that could qualify, but doesn't because of the difficulty, meaning the onerous standards that you described, that would be about right.
Right, and 3
megawatts. Because I subtracted the half megawatt from before. So
right.
Is that about right?
Right, about
okay.
right, yeah.
Yeah, it's helpful for me to be able to say that, I think, you know.
Right, and Jack Ruderman probably could answer the question better on the install side. And then you can just look online on the PUC, they update it pretty regularly. Right. They have a running list of where they're buying their RECs from.
Right.
What's that word you're saying, RECs?
Renewable energy credits is a REC. Yeah. And it's equal on the PV side, 1 megawatt hour is 1 solar REC.
And who uses RECs? Why is there value in RECs?
Well, the RPS mandates that the utility companies have to buy a certain percentage of their energy from Class 1 to Class 4. Class 2 being solar, and I believe the requirement now is 0.02% of their energy has to be bought from solar sources. Now, again, they buy it, but they're only buying the green attribute. It's like a pollution credit. So you're really not buying energy. You're still using the energy yourself. You're net metering the energy yourself. But the offset in pollution, that is what the REC is supposed to account for.
Oh, I was going to ask if you could just give a quick clarification on what an ACP is versus a REC here, just for some one-on-one. So we don't get too lost.
Okay, so an alternative compliance payment, that is the penalty that the utility has to pay for not satisfying their REC requirements.
Which is part of the renewable portfolio
standard,
the RPS.
The RPS. So the alternative compliance payment was set at $170, and in this last legislative cycle, the wisdom of the party in charge determined that solar wasn't worth that. Even if we had never paid that, what the utilities are mandated to satisfy the RPS, 0.02% being solar. At the same time, they're also mandated to the lowest cost option. So that means if the RECs are available and at the least cost, that's what they buy. So they don't ever pay the ACP if they found a source for all their RECs. However, again, those RECs lying outside of the state. So the ACP is the penalty charge, so if they can't fulfill that, that's one of the reasons why so much was leveraged, because the other classes, like I think it's Class 3, doesn't meet its requirement, so now they have to pay the $55 instead of buying it for $5, let's say. So the ACP is the penalty, the REC payment, that solar REC, is what they get in the free market. long as we're talking regs and the RPS. It said as long as we're talking regs and the RPS, it's my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong with this, that the reason the RPS jumped from $1 million to $19 million this year was that on the thermal rec side, the generators were getting paid more out of state so that they could afford to pay the ACP in-state and still make money. So that's a sort of curious and perverse occurrence that, you know, legislature doesn't take away, gives us a whole heck of a lot more money in the RPS than we otherwise would have had. Unfortunately, the budgets have already been set at the PUC, so there is no, they did project additional revenues, but nothing like $19 million. I think it was set at $6 million is what they had budgeted for. So they're going to go and move ahead with programs that expend $6 of that $19 million, and then there's a good possibility, depending on how the elections go, that the rest of it will be seized. Either returned to ratepayers, which would be the rightful thing to do, or put into the general fund, which is what would probably happen.
I disagree on both. Explain again where that $19 million is.
The payment of the recs. Yeah, the utility companies have to pay out certain monies. They pay it out to fulfill their rec requirements. If they don't pay it out, they get penalized, that alternative compliance payment. So alternatively, they pay it. And only about $80,000 of the monies in the program actually come from solar rents, because they pay mostly, they find those sources.
One reason it goes up is because the requirements for the energy companies goes up periodically. And I'm not sure we're getting 20% by 2020 or something like that. So it, you know, 3.8 will increase. And correct. Increase. And then the prices will somehow, you know, as there's less price out there, people would be getting at 18. Or more than they did last year. You have to put more mental out.
Arbitrary. The legislature set this up.
My question is actually for either Kim or Jack, or maybe anyone who has been an installer that worked in a small business in New Hampshire or a town, and what that process is like for the small business owner of town to come to the decision to get a solar system, and what drives them to actually do that, and how that can be better replicated.
Well, the small business, I've only done a couple commercial jobs. Most of my work has been residential. So the small business, the state finally came up with it took them a couple of years, but finally came up with a rebate for small businesses, which was actually pretty good. I think it's 80 cents a watt now. And that with the federal tax credit, accelerated depreciation, and if they're fortunate enough to be a co-op customer, another 25%. So I would have thought co-op customers would be jumping all over these incentives, but you know, it's a cash flow issue, which maybe power purchasing agreements come into play to help that cash flow. On the residential, on the municipality end, I've done a couple of them within my own town. It was because I was like, I did it for basically cost, just to do it, but that was even a struggle doing it at cost. I did the fire station, which was like a 12 kW array, which nets pretty much net zero, the electric part of it anyway, for the fire department. And through some low interest loans that offset their current electric bill, we were still short about and the state rebate, we were still short about $5,000. And it took about 30 minutes on the town meeting floor to come up to decide that we're going to spend $5 million to get a $50,000 system. But that's, you know, that's the mentality that nobody wants to spend any money at town meeting. So the second year I did a power purchase agreement with myself in the town, so it wouldn't cost them anything, and I did that just a little over cost. But and still, that was about a 20-minute discussion. That one went a little easier, but it's hard to raise money in towns, and the problems of municipalities or nonprofit has is, which is my biggest issue with all this funding, is either there's no federal tax credit because municipalities and nonprofits don't pay federal taxes. So they're losing 30% right there, and that's a huge chunk of the cost of the system. So all they have to work on is possibly, you know, state rebate or maybe utility company rebate, which is good, but maybe not enough to make the numbers attractive. So that's why, I went that route. And I was able to get I did power purchase agreement for like 12 years, and then the town has set rate electricity for 12 years, and then they own it.
I'm actually surprised that that the rate of small business adoption isn't much higher, because assuming a business is in good financial condition and they have a reasonable tax appetite, and at the cost of available money, I mean, there's credit union money available at ridiculous rates. When you put all that together, the investment is so obvious. I mean, I've looked at several where the cost of the system financed for 15 years is less than a 20-year power bill before you even get into the incentives, the tax credits, and the rebates. So once you put all that together, I mean, essentially you can offer a business person 2 to 3 years of no electric bills just by taking the state rebate and applying it to the loan. So I'm mystified by this. Well, I'm mystified by this. I'm sure it has something to do with businesses being concerned about cash flow. But in the case of, 2 or 3 of them, when you think about eliminating their electric bill for 2 or 3 years, it's not a cash flow problem. I think it's a question of businesses not being willing to take on any debt, regardless of the conditions. And you can make the best financial argument in the world, and if they don't want to take more debt, which means that the power purchase agreement is really the only way we're going to get there, because some of us are willing to take on the debt.
Which, by the way, is how 90+% of all PV is sold in the country now. California is almost all power purchase agreements. So, and that's the way of the future, power purchase agreements.
Hi, I'm the guy standing up.
And there were some questions behind you, but we'll let you go. You're standing in front of us.
John Ramsey, Planet Green, small company in America. Biggest issue with business, unlike him, most of our business is with businesses. The biggest issue is being careful about the word small business. Excuse me. We have a metering law that just does not work. As soon as you move into any situation where a company has 3 meters, you need a system per meter. Senate Bill 258 didn't make it, sadly. We'll all try to get it. But that would have made a very big difference. Being able to build the system based on 1 meter to apply to all 3 meters in your business makes perfect sense. Having 3 separate systems is stupid. That's a very big issue. The other aspect is not really the availability of funds. It's banks and credit unions. And banks have a lot more money than credit unions, a lot more available cash. It's validating the reality of the system. You can validate a furnace. Everyone knows everything about that. For the last 50 years, you know everything it's going to do. Sadly, cars work exactly the same way. Your car's worth, $7 grand less when you drove it off the lot. They repossess it. They'll get 35%. It's a fixed understanding. Very few solar PV systems, unless you buy Asian material, fail. So they don't have a high resale value because most people that have them, sorry, no judgment on that. You mentioned the cost of dropping the price of solar PV because of the Asian products. I actually think that they cause nothing but problems. And I'm only basing that on my personal 10 years of experience in this. Biggest issue is banks cannot validate solar PV as a resale product because there isn't a resale market for it. I know very few, unless they die. People don't sell their stuff. When was the last time you jumped on Craigslist and said, use solar PV for sale? It just isn't there. So that's been the shortfall.
Very infrequently, but it does happen.
Great.
So the transfer of a property, the prior owner says to get rid of it because they don't want to transfer that property.
Right. But then again, people that tend to buy solar PV, certainly residential people, they've usually arrived at a certain place in life, and their frequency of turning their homeowner is going to be turning it over to a new house is going to diminish. Most of our clients in residential, I don't know about yours, but they're 40, they're my age. You know, and you look at the last house you're going to die in, period. You're good where you're at, and that's where you want to go. And that I do get. It's just that I think the tight money, because banks now have to warranty their own loans, the tight money market, despite the fact that they have so much to lend, is a decisive factor in how we look at people. Also, and I'm not against the state's contribution. Okay, this sounds like my form, doesn't it?
Can you sum up? It would be great.
I'm not. I think that we need to get away from the state contribution to solar.
Move to more federal or no?
No, move to none. Base it all on logical financing. Find a way to make it work in logical finance. Okay, that's it.
We welcome you to come and work with the organization to help us lobby legislation to figure out the.
So, first to respond to what he said, I would like to see the same thing, but along with that, I'd like to see a level playing field where there aren't incentives for fossil fuels and nuclear, and then we would see the real McCoy. We would see... Wow, thank you. So my question to you is, what do we need to do short of that, or maybe that's the answer, to make PV viable to the average residents in New Hampshire? Because it's clearly the upfront first costs, at least the perceived first costs, that drive people away from it.
I'd like to hear Clay's response on that, because I do believe that, you know, in Massachusetts, where our company doesn't work, all the systems sold now are power purchase agreements. So we're not there yet for a variety of reasons. I'd like to hear Clay answer that.
And just quickly, the power purchase agreement is basically a lease?
No.
So, but
Yes.
if you were to choose one word to describe what a power purchase agreement is.
A distributed utility.
Yeah, absolutely.
Signing a contract.
That's it. It's central, it's distributed.
Okay. Peter.
So, you know, I don't know whether, you know, I listen to the election cycle right now, and the only word I hear is jobs. That's it.
Yeah.
And I know I have solar on my house, and hopefully, never again will I create a job from my solar on my roof. It's not going to happen unless something goes wrong, and someone has to go, you know, put a new tube in or something. You know, but it basically is going to save me money, take money out of people's hands, and never again will it create a job. And I think that's why purchase agreements, for instance, you know, there's sort of a legacy of financing way beyond, and people working and all these different things beyond the initial install. That there's jobs, there's a lot of jobs up here in putting them in, but there's not a lot of jobs once they get it. And if you look at any other industry that gets pushed and has big lobbyists where it's all about continually having money come into their bank over the next 100 years, 200 years, 50 years. And that's why I think banks are not all that interested. There's once the deal is done, the deal is done. And it actually takes sort of, in a sense, money out of the economy in people's minds. And so that's what we're up against. And I think purchase agreements are you know, possibly, well, I'll say this one other thing. I've got a Prius, and the reason they allow a Prius is because it actually still has an engine. They killed the electric car because it took, you know, you didn't have to use an oil filter. But this has to use an oil filter. So, okay, we'll allow it. We're sort of playing in that world, and we're allowing you to play a little bit, and we're allowing you to play over here. We need to play in their world a little bit, of showing how we're creating jobs and how we're doing that. And I think purchase agreements, again, there's things that go along after the fact that continue to, you know, have money being made.
I think, let's do some math. Tell us how many jobs each of your companies in whole represent. So the network behind you, Clay, how many, and I'll add it up. How many people do you employ?
We have 6 employees in our company, but we employ probably anywhere from 15 to 25 at a time while we're installing systems.
Okay, so like say 30.
Yep.
And provision?
50 company-wide, 15 in the state.
So 85.
No.
50 in the States, and we'll say 45. I just was saying jobs, but we'll say
35 electricians.
35?
I'd say 2 or, just on the solar part of it.
So 80 plus an additional 30 out of state with provisions. It's pretty telling.
And to expound on that, I've done the numbers. We're looking at approximately 20 electrical contractors and 20 solar installation or solar integrating companies. Probably about 200 to 250 full-time jobs in the state of New Hampshire that are either working in the state or working in surrounding states, depending on the day.
But that's a fallacy. That's a fallacy of on-the-job count. There's money not being spent on oil after they're done that is going somewhere else. It's not going to Saudi Arabia. It's staying local. How many jobs is that creating?
Yeah, that's it.
Doesn't that add to the job count? I mean, isn't that real?
But the problem is accounting for that.
I just wanted to see that it's top level.
And the power producer agreements, I mean, they end with what? Your relationship ends with that customer after X amount of years.
Yeah.
And they end up owning that equipment. Is that typically?
Yes, that's typically how it works. So the power purchase agreement on the residential side is something that's always personally intrigued me. And we were about ready to be able to put the numbers together on something like that, but then the state changed its residential rebate. And it dropped it so significantly, the bank withdrew its support. And so we were ready. I mean, we had everything. We had 40 people signed up. We were ready to roll it out. We were ready to make it happen. But the precipitous drop, it wasn't like and this has always been my thing. Stop doing this.
Yeah.
Because it takes a bank 12 months to check your background before they'll even talk to you. And then it takes them 6 months to go through all your crap. Then it takes them 12. So we're 2 years down the line before we can implement something on the business side if we're dealing with the bank. And so this kind of up and down and up and down, it doesn't matter. If it goes back up again, banks are going to say, those guys are crazy, I'm not going to deal with you, I need to go find something else to invest my money in. So the residential scale power purchase agreement, in my mind, is always, it has to be a collaborative effort to start because everybody's got to minimize risk. The state could step in and perform some kind of loan guarantee. No money out of pocket, just a loan guarantee based on the system. The group that puts the policy together has to be a consortium of installers and technical experts so that if somebody moves or they go away or they stop paying, we can repossess the equipment. I know this sounds dark, but repossess the equipment, refurbish it, and put it back at use and try and minimize the risk associated with losing the equipment. And then on the other side, then you have a bank that you minimize their risk. You say, okay, are the incentives in place? Yes, they're in place. We've set up a program. We're going to do this. It's a tester. It's a model. They're going to be in place for 2 or 3 years. Okay, who's doing all the work? They get all their stuff together. And now you have the seed for a program that allows the state to target its investment, that allows for incentives to be delivered not necessarily as cash, but as a loan guarantee. And then you go down the path of enrolling in a large group of installers in technology rather than, we will compete, and we do compete, but we all, it's odd. I think of all the industries, we're all trying to say our market needs to be bigger. There's a lot of time before we're going to start brushing up against each other. I mean, is that a fair statement? And so, the idea that residential, we're missing the boat. I've talked to investors in New Hampshire and say, it'll never work, it'll never work. You can't do that, that's ridiculous. And then you say, okay, let me tell you about these 3 companies, Sunrun, Sungevity, and Solar City. And the idiots behind them are Google, Home Depot, and Lowe's. It's like, with all due respect, it will work. It's got to be a coordinated effort, and it's got to be a stable investment, both in terms of money and policy support.
So, did I hear, we don't really need PPAs, we just need loan guarantees?
Well, no, because the PPA has, you have one person owning the system, so one entity that owns all the systems that's in conjunction with the tax equity investor. So that person goes out and finds some investment fund or somebody who says, I need a lot of tax write-offs. So they invest money in exchange for the tax equity that...
Well, tax write-offs are subsidies, right?
No. Okay. There are things that allow very rich people only pay 13%. That's the subsidy that I was talking about. That's the law. Nevertheless, the idea is that you have one person making the loan so that, and they're the ones out there qualifying all the participants. And so the bank is kept apart from all of that. The bank looks to the entity that's doing that, who is putting together the debt side, which is the bank, and then the equity side, which is this investment group that needs tax write-offs for some reason. I mean, we haven't even talked about depreciation. When you combine tax credits and depreciation like was correct, that's 50% of the cost of the system. And last year, 2 years ago, you could write off 100% depreciation on the first year. You get 30% tax credit,
100% depreciation. If you're paying a marginal tax rate of 30%, guess what? You got 60% of your system back the first year. And that's what we were jumping up and down about 4 years ago, saying, state, you got to get your incentives together because it's coming down. 1603 is coming. The accelerated depreciation is coming. We got to get it in so that we can take advantage of this. And that's what happened in New Jersey and Massachusetts, and boom.
So I'm going to change the subject altogether.
Can we do that? I think we need to be out of here by 1 o'clock, Wes, is that correct? So we have 5 minutes, and I think we should take one more question.
Go ahead.
And then wrap it up.
I have a comment, really, not so much a question. I think, my name is Arthur Kleiman. I have solar thermal on my house. I'm working with the project with the Lake West, the Lakes Regional Community College, on doing some analysis of performance of houses. And my observation over the 3.5 years that we've been doing it is the economics are what's going to drive people either on the residential or commercial side. That's what's going to drive them. I heard the comments earlier, and I agree with this, that PV is not conservation. It's really just a shift of capital investment. Either as a resident person, you're going to buy electricity, for the time you're in your home. If you're a business, you're going to buy electricity. So whether you put PV or not in your house is going to be a decision, an economic decision of whether I'm going to invest in the capital and it's going to cost me less, hedging against that future cost, or not. And presenting a reasonable transparency to either a business owner or a homeowner of how that's going to work, taking into account that they might move or so on and so forth, is what's going to drive them to decisions. What we're talking about in terms of the data we're collecting is to try to come up with a better way of informing at least a resident of how to buy a home. Solar is one piece of it, but it's just making it efficient. I see the houses being built around me right now, and I'm talking to the builder who's building them. Their buyers are saying, I want the lowest possible cost. Because I say to them, why don't you put in spray foam? Why don't you do this? Why don't you do these things that will increase the efficiency of that envelope by 50 or 60%? And they say the customers don't want it. The reason is they don't have information. So we're trying to develop a model that says, here's the cost of your home, A, whatever it is, and here's your cost of ownership for the next 5 or 10 years based on, a 5% down, 20% down, whatever you put down, and this many people in the house. And here's your monthly payment as a result of that based on that finance rate. Well, if you spent B over here, which is $10,000 more, and did these extra things that may include that solar thermal instead of electric, hot water, or propane, here's your monthly cost. And it's $80 a month less. So what do you want to do? Buy this home that's going to cost $10,000 or $15,000 more from the beginning and have $80 a month less? Or do you want to spend less money to have your sell price? Because it really is all about cash flow. But you need to have enough information to make that cash flow decision. And I think what happens is people don't have the information to see what that cash flow decision is. And so as a result, they buy the lowest possible cost house that's the most inefficient and it's going to cost them the most over time. You need to change.
I'm really bummed because there's a lot of excitement and a lot of good ideas, but we have to wrap this up. So the takeaways I see is there is a lot of interest and we need to do another one of these relatively soon to gather people like the people that are here with good ideas and continue to do this. Excuse me just a minute. And I welcome, I hear a number of people that aren't engaged with our organization that have fabulous ideas, and I really welcome you to come work with us in whatever capacity you can. You can email us, you can come to a board meeting, you can come to an open house. We really welcome everyone as a member. As I said, it's not about paying a lot of money for dues. Our dues are very small. It's about having people on our list that we can communicate with. We can keep you up to date when we need your help with a legislative issue. We can email you and you can call your senators and say it's important to us. So please become members. Please talk to us as you lead and tell us how you might want to help or be interested, work with our organization.
Can I get a sense of the audience? Do we think we'll be better off on the ramen thing than the ramen?
I'm not going to touch that one. Thanks everybody for coming.
Before you go, first of all, thanks to Ian Raymond for helping us to get the room here. Secondly, Ian, who is a driving force behind the chip plant that they've got, is going to do a quick tour for anybody who's interested. So if you want to see that, and it's worthwhile, it's saved the school district $300,000 in the first 2 years it's been. Am I correct about that? In the first 2 years it's been here. Just hang out for a couple of minutes, and Ian's going to take a tour of that. And thank you all for coming.